Last year, I fell back into playing gacha games with Zenless Zone Zero. And since then, I've kept up with MiHoYo's other big titles, being Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact. The last time I spoke about these games on the channel, I mentioned also being aware of Wuthering Waves, but not really feeling the urge to jump in at the time. It was only a few months old at the time I started playing all these games again. Since then, it's always been at the back of my mind, and every now and then I would get the drip marketing. It wasn't until the first anniversary and the release of Zani and the game launching on Steam did I find myself entertaining the idea of actually playing. I've also just spent a lot of time with Genshin, and it just felt like I needed to try something new, but still in the same ballpark. So at the start of May, I set up an account and took the plunge. This isn't going to be a day-by-day breakdown of my playthrough, but mostly a summary of the main parts of the game: story, gameplay, presentation, patches and changes, first impressions, and current feelings, all those kind of things. I might even throw in some gacha. And of course, I'm going to be comparing it to Genshin Impact. This account is going completely free to play, so we can only go up from here. Enough talk, it's time to talk. Is Wuthering Waves as good as they say? Is it really the Genshin killer? We are starting this account with one main goal in mind: pull Zani. And at this point, I do consider myself a gacha veteran. We're all familiar with the new gacha player song and dance, so I need to play as much as possible to make this happen. Right out of the gate, I think the game looks pretty good. It's not like a high-budget AAA looking game, but for a free-to-play gacha game, I think it looks pretty dang good. And I really like the character designs too. Everyone's tall and more mature looking, unless the character is supposed to be a child, pretty much setting the tone that this is a more mature game, or at least intended for a more mature audience. Even the NPCs have a lot of work put into them. They're not just all the same noseless child with different clothes or a beard. I think the game does a good job at setting a good impression, at least at the visual and character design level. There are some other things I noticed very early on that I'll talk about later. I want to compile everything into a complaints and concerns section near the end, and not just keep jumping from good to bad throughout the whole video, because I actually have a fair bit to say. One plus about the game being on Steam is that you can use Steam inputs on your controller. I was using a Switch Pro controller because my PS5 controller has so much drift now that playing another 100 plus hours of a game with it would actually kill me. I already have to deal with the death drift in HoYoverse titles because they don't natively recognize Switch controllers, and I just naturally assume that WuWa's normal client wouldn't recognize it either. So with my controls all set up, time to get into the gameplay. WuWa is a lot more gameplay forward, similar to Zenless, where the game feels almost like a light version of Bayonetta. And trust me, this game's inspirations are not subtle, which maybe hints at what I'll talk about later. Both games emphasize perfect dodges and parry counters, but where Zenless is a lot more reactionary, WuWa is a lot more observatory. Both games have tells, but WuWa only gives you an on-screen indicator for what moves can be parried. Everything else, you just need to know the timing for dodging. Zenless does have a few no-tell moves, but from what I've played, they are very rare, or they remove the indicators on higher difficulty challenges. But I don't want to go too deep into comparisons just yet, so I'll stop there. All of that was just to say that WuWa's combat is just a bit more involved and requires a bit more mental investment. On top of that, every character has their own unique meter specific to their own mechanics, which is just another layer to combat that adds to the gameplay. It doesn't really require much more than attacking until the meter is full, and then it's usually hold a button or press a combination of buttons to use another special move. Another mechanic to combat are the intro and outro skills, which also act like a second passive, just on a time limit. The effect, not the meter. The meter itself I think it acts as a good indicator to when you should swap characters, which also leads into learning your rotation a little better, or at least the order that it should go in. And swapping also takes a big chunk out of enemy stagger bars, which I haven't mentioned yet, but when you deplete the stagger bar, the enemy is stunned for a few seconds. Pretty standard stuff. I think the flow of combat does take a bit of time to get used to. You really need to put in the work to understand the characters and their roles, and kind of come up with a good rotation that flows smoothly, which the game does a pretty good job of informing you who does what at a simple glance in the character menu before you dig a bit deeper into their kit. And as quickly as you're introduced to combat, you are also introduced to the ecosystem, which is just the game's version of equipment/artifacts. And from what I've played so far, I like this system more. It's like a pseudo Pokemon kind of thing, and being able to gather usable equipment just from running around the world is nice. I don't hate the Genshin system. You just spend all your resin on farming artifacts, and then you're essentially done with farming anything. You can also spend your energy on the same kind of domains in WuWa, but the game also has the option to farm enemies in the overworld. So you can spend your daily energy on character items and still have the chance to find gear on top of that, but it's more of a time investment. It can feel like the game is sucking the hours away, and you can still just end up with nothing. Now, you do need to do the echo domains to get more of the level up material at some point. So when you run out of treasure chests and level up rewards, you'll need to farm these. Leveling up your echoes feels a lot easier here than the artifacts in Genshin. There are two separate materials you need to level up. One just for the base level, and the other is to unlock the substats, which allows you to invest as little as possible on a piece that isn't rolling great. The return you get on reusing dead pieces is also nice. It's very easy to reuse and level up a bunch in a row without investing a ton of resources. Watching YouTube guides was a huge help because I would have just full sent everything. I've actually been able to get a few really solid pieces, which has only happened like 1.5 times in my time with Genshin. Echo rarity is tied to the level of your Echo databank, not your account level. So you can start to find max quality echoes pretty early on, as long as you focus some attention on your bank level. Let's quickly go over character level up materials. Wuthering Waves uses the more modern standard of having one material to level up skills based on the weapon they use, and bosses only drop a single type of material for character level ascensions. So there's no random chance on getting a material that won't work with the character you're building for, and you can farm any material on any day. There are a few regional materials like flowers and monster drops, but the game allows you to buy these flowers from stores if you do not want to gather them from the overworld. But you can also search and find them on the map by selecting the obtain option. And if you're farming echoes and exploring, there is no shortage of the enemy drop materials, which are also limited to like 3-ish per region. So it's not like your bag is going to be full of bones, teeth, twigs, coins, gems, cogs, water drops, so on and so forth. Wuthering Waves exploration feeding into your character progression works so much better than Genshin. And I have a feeling that's because the map is more condensed. At least that's how it feels to me. If you've played any of those limited time event map areas in Genshin, this is what the map sections in WuWa feel like. The different sections are really condensed. Treasures, enemies, time trials, puzzles are all really close together. Nothing really feels like they're too far apart, or that you're running through big patches of nothing. Fast travel is still optimal for getting around, but running around doesn't feel bad. The movement in Wuthering Waves is pretty good. It's not like crazy. Just the ability to run forever and not lose stamina helps a ton. Running up walls removes a lot of tedium from exploration as well. And you also get a little air dash, just for a touch of more air control. Again, I wouldn't say it's crazy, but it does a lot to help when you're just running around and just need that little extra boost. I actually find myself running out of stamina because I keep double tapping the run button just out of muscle memory. Now, with all that said, I think it's time I finally talk about my 1.0 experience. And I totally get it. 10 minutes of yapping about the stuff you guys already know, but it was just to cover it for people who don't know, as well as give you a grasp on where I stand on the gameplay. I don't know what the patch before 2.0 was, so I'm just gonna guess as I go. I wanted to get a good feel for the game before jumping into the 2.0 content and seeing how the game had changed and the improvements that were only available in the new areas. I actually wanted to get this video out sooner, play for a month, rack up about 100 hours, but getting sick kind of set me back on getting this video out, so I just kept playing. And now we're about double that. This is about 2 months and 200 hours of Wuthering Waves. I put a restriction on myself to make sure I could get as good of a feeling for how Wuthering Waves was at launch compared to now. So I will be 100%ing all the maps and story content before moving on to 2.0. And I'll talk about my overall experience in a little bit. I just want y'all to keep in mind I played everything I could to base my opinion on. So, how was my 1.0 experience? Since it was the anniversary, even I know there was going to be a lot of freebies. Before starting, I looked up what standard units I should keep an eye out for when selecting and pulling. The top choices were Verena and Encore. After going through a bit of the main story, you finally get the gacha unlocked and it's time to start pulling. After playing for a while and racking up some of the free rewards, I finally pulled my 5-star character on the beginner standard banner, Verena, which is good because despite being a standard banner character, she's still pretty viable to this day to fill a support/healer spot. Not anything crazy since there are 2 other banners for me to just flat out pick her, but now I can use these to fill out something else I might need. So for now, I'll be looking to pick up Encore as the next standard character using the selector. But what about the Zani banner? Going through the open world and the story, at about this time, I've met Mr. the One Piece, Alto. I'm at about 50 pity on the Zani banner, and this guy keeps showing up. I've not seen anyone talk about him ever in any video, so I would imagine he's not very good. That's 60 pity now. We're getting close. She's around here somewhere. To briefly go back to the open world exploration aspect of the game, I find that the puzzles in the overworld to be a lot more engaging than what is found in Genshin. They do still have the same fight the camp of enemies to unlock the chests, but the bigger dedicated puzzle spots I find a lot more interesting. They reward you with more items and currency based on the difficulty of the puzzle. Difficulty can be replaced with how long it takes. There's enough variety and they're engaging enough to break up the monotony of running around the open world, doing the same thing over and over again. Thinking I was going to get this video out sooner, I ended up blitzing through all the way up to Havoc Rover in a couple days. But at least I took the time to check out the anniversary event to get those sweet, sweet asteroids. The anniversary event, I think, was okay. It was really weird coming in as a new player, getting introduced to all these characters that I've never seen or only just met. I do think the event is fun and the extra rewards are nice, but I do have some more to say about events as a whole after putting more time into the game, so that's coming later. That might sound like a bit of bad news, but to give you guys some good news, after 3 days of grinding the story and exploring, it's finally time to hit our very first limited 5-star character. Welcome home. Losing your first 50-50, it hurts. But at least it was Encore. Now, I'm kind of free to select whoever. I picked Calcharo since he's another main DPS. And I know you need at least 3 teams for the endgame tower. So having him in the back pocket, I think, was a good idea. At this point, I ended up playing a lot off camera, pretty much just completing areas and finishing up side quests. I actually really liked that the map completion rewarded you with more standard pulls. It was a really good motivator for completing these areas because some of these zones were a nightmare to complete, but it'll all be worth it. After getting introduced to this game's version of Paimon, Abby, I'm guessing I'm at about the 1.1, 1.2 story content now, because there's a new area coming up with more content to complete and explore. Before even setting foot into the next main area, so hey, at least if you're a new player, there's enough content in 1.0 to get you the 5-star character you want, I think. There was some extra event stuff going on, but there's probably still enough. And I don't have footage of this, but I did end up pulling her weapon on my first 10 pull, so that kind of makes up for the lost 50-50. Lucky me. Some of you might be thinking, Zani is a 2.0 character. How can you have a pure 1.0 experience having her around? Well, I don't have access to her Echo set yet, and at this point in our journey, I don't even know what it does. Spectral Frazzle won't be explained for another long while, but we'll get there. Now it's time for Mount Firmament. Still a part of the main map, but kind of its own mini overworld. At this point in my playthrough, something hit the right part of my brain because the music in this area is so good. And I haven't mentioned music yet, which is weird for a game that is music themed. But the music in the first area was just kind of standard stuff. Nothing popped out to me as a standout tune. But Mount Firmament has this lovely melodic tune that just sets the mood. From this point forward, the music just continues to be a huge part of the game and only gets better. This game has some killer tracks. It took me a while to warm up to some of Genshin's tracks, but this game just had it right away. I really like Mount Firmament, and with the conclusion of the story here, it's off to the final area of 1.0, the Black Shores. Now I'm guessing we're at about 1.4, 1.5 in terms of updates. These last chunks here are pretty small areas, and I can't imagine players would be stuck here for more than a patch or two. I know I could just look this up, but I think it's more fun to guess. The Black Shores is very similar to Mount Firmament. It's a more condensed, more focused area with more so a focus on the story. And so far, I've held off on talking about the story because I want to give my positive points before really digging into the weeds. And there isn't really anything here in the Black Shores in terms of puzzle or exploration that we haven't seen before, except for a few really tough enemy challenges, which I still haven't gone back to do actually. I didn't count them towards the 100% because I was just using the map percentage to get the majority of these areas. Thankfully, these fights did not count towards the 100% of the map because there was no way I was beating any of those. But now I think it is time to talk about the 1.0 story. Jumping into this game knowing nothing but the name and seeing the drip marketing, I assumed Wuthering Waves was water themed, but very quickly realized that it's music themed, but also water themed. The Black Shores and all that stuff. I was going into this with all intentions to become invested in the story. And I gotta say, it was very clunky. The game opens up and they just start blasting you with universe jargon and characters, tacit discords, tacit fields, sentinels, the lament, echoes, resonators, terminals, Jinjo. And it doesn't help when you finally get to the city that they just sit you in a room and talk to you. From the 1.0 story, all I picked up on was that Fraxidus is the main antagonist group trying to cause another lament. Okay, the rain makes you hallucinate and see past events, and all this stuff made a giant stone guy show up. What a Threnodian was at this point was completely lost to me. I really could not connect the dots with what was going on and why. Even watching story recap videos to get more of an understanding, the recap videos say, if you feel like you're lost with what's going on, don't feel bad. It's not your fault. What? Mount Firmament was a little self-contained story about Jinshi and Jue becoming a Sentinel Resonator and why Mount Firmament is trapped in time. A little anime-y, but very understandable. I feel like the Black Shore story was pretty much just to sum up what is going on, what happened to the world, who Rover vaguely is, and get us our next clue on where to go. I was kind of checked out with the story at this point. It was pretty bad. And to bring everything said up to this point into a conclusion, version 1 was okay. Looking back on what people were saying, people raving about the game, this is the Genshin killer, the gameplay is better, and there is more gameplay meat on the bone here, but I don't think it was enough to play this over Genshin in most cases. Genshin also doesn't have a great story. The main plot only moves forward when Dainsleif shows up, and you might get a drip feed of information in the Archon quests. Even then, you better be paying attention or reading the little books you pick up everywhere. Maybe if you compare version 1 Genshin to version 1 Wuthering Waves, Wuthering Waves is probably the better game, but version 5 Genshin compared to version 1 WuWa, Genshin just has more to offer. And that is almost an unfair comparison, but that's the position Wuthering Waves is in. But Wuthering Waves version 2, oh my goodness. This is not the same game anymore. Rinasida is not the same as Huanglong. Right out of the gate, the story is more streamlined. It takes the main story elements from version 1 and makes a smaller, more understandable experience. It's also more character focused. You know, who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? What do the good guys want? And what do the bad guys want? It was way better and way easier to get invested in the plot. Exploration has been made quite a bit easier in version 2 as well. Maybe a bit too easy. In version 1, it wasn't bad going around and scanning for chests and puzzles, but getting that 100% in some of the areas was so difficult that I had to look up guides. In version 2, objectives and treasure spots are marked on your map, and if something is missing, you can just select it on the map menu, and the game will just highlight the area it's in. It does take a bit of fun out of exploring, since you know where everything is. There are still a few hidden treasures around, but nothing to really impact the 100% completion. I kind of don't like the change, but I also don't like looking up guides on YouTube, so I'm mixed on this solution. Also, you can fly now. I didn't even bring that up yet. Pretty soon after getting into 2.0, you just unlock flying. It's pretty nice. I didn't really have a problem with fast traveling or running, but you know what? Flying is nice. In the short span of a year, Wuthering Waves has caught up to Genshin, where Genshin Impact is still implementing quality of life updates 4-5 years later. Simple stuff that should have been included in something like a 2.0 update. WuWa has managed to close the gap in 1 year. They know what the people want, they know where they're not getting it, and they are putting in the work to listen and implement. And with all that said and done, I think it's time to get into the negatives. To start, obviously the story at the beginning is pretty rough, and while going through, I noticed a lot of things where Kuro Games were getting their inspiration from. And it's not like MiHoYo doesn't take inspiration either, but where MiHoYo has the Honkai Cinematic Universe connections to their games, keeping you interested and invested, Wuthering Waves seems to be standalone. For the first chunk of the game, you can tell the developers were inspired by Death Stranding, just the way the environment is designed, the lore about the lament changing the world, the weird rain. The rain in WuWa doesn't make you old though. They even have Death Strandsman in the game. Other things I picked up on was Xenoblade. Some of the tech is kind of Xenoblade-y, but Fraxidus are pretty much just Mobius. They dressed almost the same. and their goal in being to cause another lament, pretty much just meaning third impact, bringing in some Evangelion. I am going somewhere with this. I just want to list how much I noticed. When the Black Shore story starts, Rover gets on a piano, starts playing a song and says, "This song sounds familiar." Yeah, Rover, you're playing Aerith's theme. If the first area was inspired by Death Stranding and Xenoblade, the 2.0 areas are inspired by Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy, with a dash of DMC4 and Pirates of the Caribbean. They even brought the style system into some of the fights on the overworld. And there's that one area I swear they're just playing Calling You Out of Darkness. And hey, if you swap to a gun character, you can just play DMC2. Slight story spoiler for this next one, but during Cardathia's theme, the slower version one, after the chorus, they're just playing Dearly Beloved from Kingdom Hearts. Cardathia herself is basically the answer to the age-old question, what if Zelda was a girl? And I'm not trying to say that I hate this. I'm a dumb, jaded weeb. I love this stuff. But noticing all of this does take away from Kuro Games' creative integrity. There are only so many times I can just clap my hands and say,
Neon Genesis Evangelion. Wow.
Right now, I'm pretty okay with it, but I would like Wuthering Waves to go into more original creative ideas that maybe have a sliver of inspiration, but not a noticeable one-to-one comparison. The next problem is that the game can feel like a drag sometimes, mostly in the early game character roster and events. I had the same problem in Zenless when I only had my Ellen team and Cunning Hair's team. Now after playing for a while and building up a roster, it's way more fun. So this will likely be the same with Wuthering Waves. But another area where the game drags are in the events. When I was looking up the early game guides and account building tips, I heard about this fishing event and that it was very good, except for the end. After playing it, I can confirm the end was grueling. And this extends into the movie world event. All the big events just feel like they're 20-30% too long. There also just doesn't seem to be as much going on in Wuthering Waves compared to the Hoyoverse games. Like, it always feels like there's an event going on in Genshin. And I know I've only played Wuthering Waves for a couple months now, but it feels like they just do one long event and one short event you can complete pretty quickly with just a long stretch of nothing happening. I don't know. Just feels a little uneventful. The last thing is just game quality, and I am aware that Kuro Games are not a huge company like MiHoYo, but something about Wuthering Waves just makes it feel weird. One is the voice acting early on. You can tell right away that the VAs are European and fighting their accent to give an American performance, but in 2.0, they just went full European. So I don't know why they did that. Maybe they didn't want the game to sound like Xenoblade? I like the dub in Xenoblade. I can't imagine those games without it. But when you can hear the actors fighting the words they say, it takes away from the performance. And apparently they redubbed version 1 too. So I don't even know what was going on before this. I think it's kind of rude that half the cast have to hide their accent while the new characters can just go full ham in their normal voice. Another dip in quality is just how the game runs. It might be because of Unreal Engine, but it feels like the foundation that the game is built on is not that solid. Some of the audio mixing is really weird. Some characters are louder and quieter. Some character voices sound like they've been recorded with different equipment at different locations. Some of the sound effects are way too quiet, and Raguna has 200% audio jump scare trumpets. So every time you fast travel there, you're risking a heart attack. Some of the enemy models clip and hover when you're fighting. Not enough to ruin the experience, but enough for me to note it here. It's weird, because the gameplay itself is solid. It's like the game is being held together with chewing gum and popsicle sticks. Where Genshin, the gameplay is much simpler, which isn't a bad thing, but I cannot recall a time when something looked or sounded off. I maybe had to reload once in the year I've been playing, but it's just built right and feels quality. I've had a few times where Wuthering Waves just crashes or runs really framey for no reason. You also have to restart the game when patches and hotfixes roll out, which is maybe a Steam version issue, but it's kind of dumb. Can we not have like a soft reset? With playing more and looking up team comps and characters, I've also come to the conclusion that there is a 4-star character problem. I think the biggest outlier to this is with the introduction to the elemental debuffs. I'm guessing introduced at the end of 1.0 and the start of 2.0. It's very strange to introduce a whole new set of abilities tied to new characters, but drip feed one 5-star character who can use it at a time. By the way, I did end up caving and pulling for Phoebe or Zani. You would think because of the way other gachas introduce new mechanics, you would have a new 5-star who uses it and introduce a 4-star option who is a sub-support or sub-main DPS for this mechanic to sort of work with the new character until a premium option becomes available. I don't even think it's insane for WuWa to introduce an echo set that allows 1.0 characters to apply their elemental debuff to supplement a support for not having a premium option, or a character role that doesn't even exist yet. It sounds crazy to me. Version 2 should have had a new 5-star and a new 4-star every patch that worked with the new combat mechanic. I know these guys have to make their money, but like when Zenless introduced Aftershock, for people who don't play, that just means a character will attack while off field. They had a 4-star option to make use of the new mechanic when it came out. It's weird to introduce this new stuff, but no character to access or support it. All of this leaves an impression, and I think it does detract a bit. But I think the flip side of all this is that Kuro Games do listen to feedback and are quick to respond to the community. I don't know how long these trumpets have been blasting, but maybe they'll be silenced soon. And the overall experience is a very good free-to-play open-world gacha game, with more emphasis on combat and gameplay, and version 3, who knows what could happen. Version 2 blew me away, so it's very likely possible again. If you made it this far, thank you guys for watching. Yeah, I wanted to get this video out sooner, but life happens. Definitely missed some points. I will try to add those and fix them while editing, but I don't know. I'll probably still miss something. If I miss something, feel free to leave a comment. And if you want to see more, like, comment, subscribe. The next few videos are going to be gacha based, so that's coming. But yeah, gonna try and get the next one out. Need to record and write a script. So hopefully a few videos in the next little bit. Hopefully a few.